I'm Thanasi Kambanis. You're listening to Order from Ashes, the Century Foundation's International Affairs podcast. Today, we're talking to two journalists and veteran observers of the European Union about what's happened to the EU during this latest crisis with COVID-19 and what lessons we can learn from it about how to build a better and more effective international order. Welcome to the Order from Ashes podcast. I've got on the line from Brussels, David Carretta, an Italian journalist for Il Foglio and Radio Radicale. David, thanks for joining.
Thank you to you.
And also joining us on the line from Milan is Rolla Scolari, a journalist for Il Foglio and La Stampa. We're going to start this conversation by talking about what's actually happened to the EU during this latest crisis. David, do you want to walk us through in a couple of minutes how the EU has risen or not risen to the challenge?
Well, it's difficult to say because the EU is not a state. It's an international organization. The European Union member states were totally unprepared to this pandemic. And they reacted one by one in a typical national way. So they started to introduce lockdown, to close borders between them, to stop export of protective material and other stuff quite important like ventilators. The EU institutions were trying to coordinate the action of member states, but member states decided to go alone. And the result was quite a mess, I would say, with people blocked at borders, with a lot of important material blocked at borders too, and the result was a situation worsening day by day.
David, let me just ask. From an American perspective, we look at the chaos here, from the failure to have tests on hand to the insane competition between states and the federal government for basic supplies like personal protective gear and masks. And I would imagine that sort of coordination is exactly what the EU would be excellent at, right? With its fantastically well-funded cadre of technocrats who would, I would guess, and it sounds like maybe this didn't happen. I would imagine that Europe would be perfectly positioned to say, oh, this thing is coming down the road. Our experts are paying attention, and we are going to come up with a plan to make sure that Italy gets the ventilators and masks it needs early, and that we have a plan in place for Spain and Germany and so on. Did that happen? And if not, why not? Where was all that?
The technocrats of the European Union tried to coordinate and organize a more sensible response to the pandemic. In January, they had some meetings asking, for example, what was the situation of stockpile of health material in the member states. The answer by the member states was, we have no problem. We have masks, we have ventilators, so don't worry for us. After just 1 month, there was the mess, the chaos. And the point is that the European Union has no competence on health issues. The competence are just for member states. They have the duty and the right to protect their citizens as they want, even putting borders and blocking export for other member states, because it is an international organization, not a sovereign state, the European Union, and the treaty which regulate this international organization has plenty of clauses saying in case of emergency, you can do what you want. So the point is that the real mess was made by member states inside their country and between them, and it's bad. Right now, they are trying to, the European Union institutions are trying to organize something better. It's not easy because everybody is quite hysterical. Each member state, each government want to keep mask, ventilators, and so on for them, even if they don't need it. And voila, they are trying to do their best, the technocrats, but the real power is at national level. So it's like, we do not have any Trump power to take all the masks from states like in America and then sharing it among all the American states. There is no such power in Brussels.
And that's not, and although that power exists in the United States, it has largely been unused by this administration. Rolla, from where you sit so I'm in, I guess, the current epicenter of the epidemic in New York, or of the pandemic in New York. You are in Milan, in what was until recently the most hardest hit place. What in your view, or rather, who in your view is most responsible for the catastrophic mishandling of the response there? Is it the Italian government? Is it Europe? Is it some who do you blame?
Listen, in mid-March, Italy political leaders accused the EU of being, slow in responding to the crisis and in coming to the country's help over the outbreak of the epidemic. The government complained of, as David said, lack of solidarity among member states.
And China sent help before European neighbors did, right?
China and Russia.
China.
They did it. And, when I talk about leaders complaining, I'm not just talking about complaints coming from populist leaders, but from, for example, from the same president of Italy, Sergio Mattarella, who is a staunch supporter of Europeanism. So Italy was asking for extra supplies of medical equipment and medical masks, and everything was stuck at borders, and member states were closing borders. But I think we should not mix up between member states and European institutions when we are talking about EU response, because I think European solidarity eventually arrived, late, that's sure, but without being announced by fireworks or fanfare, like it happened, as we mentioned, with China and Russia, that sent aid, and they did it with a lot of noise, also moving their propaganda machines in a certain way. The European response, I think it came late, but eventually, for the first time in history, European Commission suspended its strict rules on public deficit. They triggered the so-called general escape clause. And the central bank launched a 750 billion euro emergency bond plan, and they're going to discuss on Tuesday measures for like 500 billions, and the parliament approved a 37 billion package from available EU funds to counter and tackle the crisis in the countries that are hit hardest. So, without all these packages and all these aids, most of the countries in Europe would not be able to tackle the crisis and to solve the problems that they're facing with their healthcare system and to limit the outbreak. So yes, I think member states acted in a very messy way, but I think we should focus on not not confounding what the institutions are doing and how the member states are reacting. That says this crisis, like all the European crises in the past, the debt crisis and the migration crisis in 2015, it set off all the contradictions and the weakness of the union. And it's true that countries and member states remain divided on how to help the economy, for sure.
I mean, look, the European Union is the most audacious experiment in shared sovereignty in modern times, I would say, arguably ever. And those of us who are of an internationalist bent have found it an inspiring experiment. But the way it has responded to, I'd say, every major crisis since the end of the Cold War is dispiriting. And the three big ones that leap to mind are first the financial crisis in 2008, then the migration crisis and the concomitant rise of the authoritarian far right, and now COVID-19. And in each of these instances, it seems to me that that all the member states have resorted sort of to a nationalist crouch. That their way of calculating their interest or their way forward has been to, to borrow a phrase from the American president, to my country first. And I'm curious, is that impression? Do you share that impression? And if so, was there anything that the European Union, which is that sort of, it's that web of institutions, and it's also that sort of choice to cede authority voluntarily to those institutions in the interest of the common good, even when you don't have to. Is there anything that group of entities could have done to take more power or authority or momentum in responding to these crises?
I don't agree with your judgment of the past. I would say that the European Union has managed quite well all the crises of the last 20 years. Can you imagine Italy in front of a financial crisis as the one that touched all over the world in 2008 without the European Central Bank, which means the German central banks? That's the point. The Italy would have been in a much worse situation right now, because probably it would have defaulted in 2010 or 11 or 12, and so people would have not got his salary, their salaries, their pensions, and so on. It was difficult, but at the end, Europe managed to find a way to put the crisis in the history books, the financial crisis, I mean. On migration, Europe played a major role to close borders with Libya and with Turkey, putting money for member states. You can have a moral judgment of what they have done, because they stopped to accept the majority of refugees from Syria or from African countries. But the flow of migrants stopped, and it was difficult. It took quite some time, but at the end of the day, the migration crisis was put in the history's books. I don't know if with the COVID will be the same. But what I'm seeing from Brussels is a group of technocrats, as you call them. In fact, they are politicians. They have no power, and they cannot invent their power in just a night. They are trying to coordinate a more sensible response to the health crisis. And at the same time, they are putting a lot of money to help member states to manage the economic crisis that is already there. So I wouldn't call it a success for the moment, but it could be effective tomorrow.
We'll be right back after this break.
At a time when the focus of politics is on being the loudest voice and not the most informed, the Century Foundation delivers thoughtful, evidence-based policy leadership with purpose. I'm Lucy Muirhead, Chief Strategy Officer at the Century Foundation. We work to reduce inequality, foster opportunity, and promote peace and security, carrying on a tradition that TCF's founder began in 1919. In the century ahead, we'll continue to prioritise rigour over reactivity, elevate the best ideas and most diverse voices, and never lose sight of what it takes to make an impact.
I'm Thanasi Kambanis. You're listening to Order from Ashes. I'm here with David Carretta and Rolla Scolari, and we're talking about how the European Union has handled the COVID-19 crisis and what lessons internationalists can draw from Europe's performance. Before the break, David was presenting a sort of more optimistic take on how the European Union has responded to the radical crises that have tested it over the last decade. Rolla, you, I think, wanted to elaborate or maybe disagree?
Actually, I want to agree because I also think that eventually Europe come around and it did it already in the past because the European Union each time is under pressure, improvises solution, and it happened with the debt crisis and it happened with the migration crisis in the past. So I think that even if Brussels acted late and slowly, I don't think member state will be able to survive this crisis without the help of the union. I just want to make you think about something. There's a gentleman sitting in London. His name is Boris Johnson. He's the guy who was saying take back control, and he's Mr. Brexit. And these days, what he's doing is asking doctors coming from all over the union to stay in Great Britain and not to leave the hospitals because its own healthcare system is under pressure. So
one of those foreign NHS doctors is my brother.
You see? So, I mean, this is also Europe. We have to think about this. Europe is doctors from all over the member states working and living in other member states and working for a common good in this very moment. So I think it's important to understand that what Europe can do. It's not just in terms of economical aid and packages and working through institutions. Is also what the Union has done in the past decades with free movement and the possibility for workers from Italy to be in UK now, helping with the epidemic and with the outbreak.
Well, so this brings me to the question I wanted to ask you both in this section of our conversation, which is in this radical experiment in pooled sovereignty that is the European Union. What works and what are the failure points? And it seems to me that a lot of the debate over this, including during Brexit, ended up pitting sort of idealists against people who might have shared the same ideals, but were just observing, the sort of real limits of what people are willing to give up. And a lot of the time you would hear sort of pro EU people say, well, if only the member states would just be willing to give up, surrender X, Y, and Z power to Brussels. And of course, in reality, this isn't a judgment, just an observation. In reality, almost no government is going to give up its control of its borders, let's say, or control of its military, or even control over the bits of its economic policy that remain sovereign to Brussels. And that's not a moral judgment. I mean, maybe it has moral dimensions, but in any case, that's the behavior of states. So we've now seen this over decades. States aren't just going to sort of vanish into some international government that takes over their functions, and that ends up being the friction point. The reason why I'm interested in this now is because the world is at another crisis point, and people are starting to ask, what are better ways to have states either collaborate with each other or share resources or share decision making and sometimes share power. And I think the EU is really the only meaningful model that we have to look at. So that's why it's important to identify what are the limits of this and what are the sort of core elements that have worked, so we can build on those. So I know it's a lot of questions, and maybe we'll go back to you, David, to start us off with what are the bits that you say, at its core are successes, and what are the bits at its core that are either misconstrued or don't work and should be taken into account in designing the architecture of a system like this?
Thank you for the question. The point is that the European Union, as you said, is quite unique. It's a mix of member states, institutions, and so on. It's quite complicated. We don't have a federal government. The project was developed in, I would say, the opposite way of national state. So competencies on foreign policy, on defense, on economic, at the beginning were all on member states, not in Brussels. And they tried to unite in a very technocratic way. So putting money on agriculture and making a very big internal market, which mean standards for everybody. Then, at a certain point in the 80s and 90s of the last century, Europe took a much more important role in member states, in the world, and so on. And people started to say, well, we need democracy in Europe, and we need more political Europe. And when you put politics in a technocratic institution, you start to have problems, especially if this institution doesn't have any real power on important things like economic, like defense, like foreign policy. And today the problem is the same. Today the real problem is politics. We have 27 member states, 27 governments, and 27 oppositions in Europe playing politics. And the best way to avoid responsibility in front of each national electorate is putting the blame on Brussels. Hey, we have a problem. Where is Europe? Hey, there is a pandemic. Where is Europe?
There's an authoritarian government in Hungary turning a democracy into a dictatorship. Where is Europe?
Of course, where is Europe? But no, I didn't see any national member states which took sanctions against Hungary. So, they have the power to cut trade with Hungary if they want, but nobody wants to cut trade with Hungary. They're just saying, well, where is Europe? Which is a good question. Huh? And Europe is not reacting strong enough in front of Orban.
Isn't that a huge failure point, though, David? I mean, this is where I'm not alone in having invested maybe unrealistic hopes in what a sort of imagined entity like the EU could do to curb the real behavior of states. But I'm disappointed that it hasn't either tried or been effective at rolling back really the imposition of a dictatorship in the heart of Europe. And I'm not sure what it could do other than maybe use its bully pulpit to at least condemn it. But it seems, just like with the migration crisis, just like with Turkey, just like with the borders, whenever push comes to shove and it's a question of giving up money for principle, and I don't mean just moral principle, but political principle, the EU as a collective and the member states have zero spine. And I mean, I think of Italy making huge economic deals with Egypt right after Egypt, tortured and killed an Italian national, and that was a very sort of gross and simple illustration of commercial interests versus political principle. And I think it's analogous to the response to Hungary or the response to the migration crisis, where the EU basically paid Turkey to keep people on their side of the border in a bribe that really had no positive policy content, but was expedient and I would say ran really counter to not just European principles, but European laws.
It's difficult to answer to your question because you are mixing up everything.
Yes, that's what I do.
Yeah, sorry, but the point is that Europe is a cooperation project. It's not and what if you have one member state that decide not to cooperate, you have a problem. The machine will not work. And that's what we are seeing in different crises and so on. But at the end of the day, the common interest prevail, and they manage to find a way forward. And you mentioned Hungary. It's true. It's true. There is no reaction right now to the emergency law adopted by the parliament in Budapest, unfortunately. And the European Union institution reacted quite slowly to the Orban history of grabbing power during the last 15 years, I guess. But there are rules, and they started what we called, in a very technocratic way, Article 7 procedure, which means that you could be suspended from the European Union, stop money flowing, and so on. Brussels started this process, but there are rules, and the rules say that if one member state objects to this sanction, you cannot adopt this sanction. And there is another member state, which is Poland, saying we will not approve sanctions against Hungary because we are in the same situation in terms of autocratic behavior. So we have rules, and we have to respect those rules, and which means that Brussels, the Donald Trump of Europe. Do you know the name of Donald Trump of Europe, by the way?
Who is the Donald Trump of Europe?
I don't know. I don't know. Do you know? Do you know the name of the president of the commission?
Isn't it Donald Tusk?
No, no. It's Ursula von der Leyen.
Oh, right. She's the German kind of right winger
defense minister.
Yeah,
but we have also
she's kind of a family values right winger with some pretty terrible ideas, as I recall.
She is progressive for a German. And the former Donald Tusk is a Belgian guy called Charles Michel. Do you know who is Charles Michel? I mean, his history.
You're gonna embarrass me a lot on my podcast.
No. But that's the point. I mean, you know who is Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson. It may be Giuseppe Conte, but you don't know the people who are leading Europe because they don't have so much power. They are in the hands of national member states, 27, and each member state need to cope with its internal opposition. So we are in a situation right now with Italy asking money from Brussels. And the opposition is saying, well, Brussels is very bad with us because they don't give us money. But in the Netherlands, they will vote in 1 year time. You have the opposite. So the populistic opposition to the government is saying, we don't have to give money to the Italians because they are Italians. They will spend it in pizza and cafe and Campari. And we don't want that the Netherlands taxpayers pay for the Campari of the Italians. So that's to say that it's a very complicated project. And the more you put competencies and sovereignty in Brussels, the more you will have problems like that. Because we don't have a constitution, Europe is not a federal state, it's an international organization, and at the end of the day, it's the national politics that count more than the Brussels bubble policy.
We'll be right back.
Today's world is changing faster than ever. Old rules don't apply, and the new rules haven't been written. At least not yet. I'm Rohan Advani, and I produce the Order from Ashes podcast at the Century Foundation, a leading progressive think tank that promotes peace, cooperation, and equality at home and abroad. On Order from Ashes, we try to make sense of a new international system in which America no longer dictates the global order. Join us as we talk to activists and analysts on the front lines of the most pressing issues in international policy.
I'm Thanasi Cambanas. I'm talking with David Carretta and Rolla Scolari about Europe and what we can learn from what David just identified for us as an international institution rather than some kind of federal entity. Rolla, let's start with you in this final section of our conversation. I want to hear your thoughts on what we can learn from this, and especially after this crisis, if we're imagining a Europe that works better, or if we're imagining other international organizations, be it the WHO or the UN, or you name it, functioning better. What do we take from the European record at this point, and what do you think is a plausible way to do this better?
There's something that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen declared a few days ago that surprised many people and many commentators in Italy. She said, Europe suffers with Italy and Europe will help Italy. So many commentators reacted saying, wait, Italy is Europe, is a founding state of Europe, and so Europe should help itself. It's not helping Italy. Europe is helping itself. So it seems to me that in terms of the European project, with the passing of time, we lost the values on which the project was first founded in a certain way, because it's true that when everybody's thinking of Europe in the single member states, is thinking about technocrats sitting in Brussels and bureaucratic elites. Still, they're elected because the parliament is elected by member states. But the idea is the idea of technocrats sitting far away, making messy laws and talking about money. But the European Union, the idea, the first project of the European Union was not just based on finance and economical aid and economical structure. When the founding father were talking back about the idea of a union, they were talking about a common sentiment, common values. When Churchill first spoke about United States of Europe, it was back in 1946. He was speaking about a European family, liberty and freedom, and something based like a project that was rejecting authoritarian regimes and supporting democracies. And here we go back to Hungary and what happened with Orban. We forget that the union was not just born on financial and economical basis, but on a common sentiment. And I think the pandemic is an occasion to, in a certain way, we find ourselves at the crossroads. So is it true, like populists said, that the European Union is useless and it's just a headache for the member state, or the European Union is the right way to collaborate on an international level to solve crises? I think we have to start from here, and the crisis in Hungary, it's not just a side story of the bigger story of this emergency, this outbreak. It's like very important that Europe focus also on what is going on in Hungary, because one of the main purpose of the union is to sustain liberal democracy and remember that the basis on which it was founded is supporting liberal democracies, and I think we should really focus on this aspect of the crisis. And of course, the financial and economical one, it's important because we are going to be in an economic crisis. We are already in an economic crisis, but we don't have to let the pandemic be the justification for like populist and autocrats to erode our liberties.
At the same time, we can't compel states to give up power they don't want to give up. And the League of Nations collapsed because the nations involved didn't actually want to pool power. To the extent that the UN was successful during the Cold War, it was on a voluntary basis. And I think the sort of best successes of the EU have similarly been on matters where the powerful states in the EU saw it in their interests to genuinely invest in that shared power. And that sort of leads to my one of my big fears or big worries, which is that I do think bad trajectories unfortunately can be sustainable. So we could see a sort of lowest common denominator Europe continue for some time, where Europe can't do anything to stop European nations from turning into dictatorships, but it can do some things to pull back, for example, after this pandemic or after a financial crisis, to pull back from a brink. And that's better than nothing, but it's not a transformative way forward. So some of the thoughts that this raises for me is, one, is there a way to set a different sort of bar that does not trigger people's fears of having their autonomy or national sovereignty encroached, even when they pool resources? And two, does there have to be some kind of cataclysmic event, and maybe this epidemic is it, in order to renew a sense of there being some real benefit in giving up national power to a supranational institution?
I can agree with you. I would agree with you. Um, I think that the best way to demonstrate to people the benefits of Europe is stopping to have Europe. We can have a European day without Europe, and we are living it right now with the COVID pandemic day by day. We have borders. Italy could face a major financial crisis in the markets. Hungary could lose a lot of the money that received from the European Union because all the money will be concentrated in other issues related to the economic crisis of other member states. At the end of the day, this crisis could benefit because what we are seeing is member states, national capitals, isolating themselves like people are doing in their apartment. The question is, will the people understand that it's better to live together outside our apartments, or they would start to think that being isolated and watching Netflix is better than going to the cinema or to the theater and so on. I hope that this COVID-19 crisis will push people thinking what the benefits are of staying outside and to be open to the world. The same for Europe. I mean, for member states. At the end of the day, if they can help each other, they will find a more sustainable solution to the economic crisis and to the pandemic. If they don't stay together, they will face more problem. That's the point. We have seen it. Hungary 1 month ago decided to reintroduce border control with other member states, but the virus, the coronavirus, went in Hungary even with the borders. The same for other countries. The fact is that a rational choice would be to cooperate. An emotional choice is to close border and try to manage the crisis alone. A lot of government are receiving support from their public opinion, but in a couple of months, I can imagine a very different situation if they are not able to cooperate, because the consequences will be very hard for each and everyone.
It's even shocking in the United States, which is a federal system, to see the huge disparities between different regions and, red states and blue states, or states that are currently an epicenter of the pandemic, and others which are going to be, unfortunately, a month from now. And one of the things this brings to mind is, I think that internationalists and free traders and unionists have not done a good job of promoting an idea of local capacity and security that's an alternative to the one of the chauvinists. So, in other words, to give resources and power locally, let's say in the form of border patrol capability or health sector resources or the kinds of things that make in the EU case countries or in the United States' case states feel like they're going to be okay in a crisis. And I think if you succeed at giving people real security as opposed to a sort of simulacrum of it, then they're also maybe going to be more willing to surrender central decision-making power to Washington or Brussels if they feel like they have the resources locally to protect themselves from, be it from a pandemic or from, the economic challenges of a wave of migration or whatever the challenge is. That would make them less susceptible to the proposals of the right-wing nativists and chauvinists. Now, that's not an idea that's been tested, and it might be naive, right? It might just be that in real life, it's always easier. Rather, in real life, it might always be the nihilists and the secessionists and the chauvinists who have an advantage because they have a project of erasure. And it's the institutionalists and the unifiers who are at a disadvantage because we're always talking about long-term shared common good that feels more abstract and not immediate. I think we're running towards the end. So do each of you want to take a minute to sort of sum up your big lessons learned from all this, or your final thoughts?
So yes, I'd like to add something. Donald Trump's strategy of America First is shared by most of the national populist movements around the world, and this is exactly what threatens every shared sovereignty project. The idea of each member state first is something that Europe cannot tolerate more than this. I mean, everybody working for itself is a threat to Europe, of course, and this is what is prevailing at the time in a lot of member states, because we know that a lot of populist movements are governing and are winning elections around the union. In terms of history, I mean, I still think the EU project it's absolutely worth defending, and this is clear. I mean, we never saw in European history the current level of security, prosperity, and cooperation and freedom. I mean, in 7 decades since the end of the Second World War, Europe prospered, and this is thanks to the European Union. And as Timothy Garton Ash wrote some months ago on The Guardian, I think he was writing about Brexit. In a long historical perspective, this is the best Europe we have ever had. So obviously the project is perfectible, but at the time being, it gave Europe and European the longest period of prosperity and security in their entire history. And even in front of this crisis, it's proving that the collaboration between states, even if it's full of holes and problems, it's still the only solution, and it eventually can work.
David, you want to close this out with your final thought?
I agree with Rolla. Europe has the most advanced welfare state in the world. If you think that 6 million Americans asked for unemployment last week. We don't have this problem right now in Europe, because we have systems which guarantees your employment, and it's paid by the states. Why? Because we are rich countries, and most of them, I would say all of them, are so rich right now thanks to the European Union. Then you have politics. And politics is very toxic when it's not based on facts, on analysis, on the real world, and it's just something for power. Do you remember 2008? The reaction to the financial crisis was quite huge in terms of international cooperation. President Bush and then President Obama, with the French president Nicolas Sarkozy at that time, Gordon Brown in the UK, they convened the G20, the G7. The Chinese were at the table, and they choose to cooperate in front of that crisis. Today, we have a situation that is completely different. We have no G20, no G7. We have nothing in terms of international cooperation. In Europe, we have problems. We have member states that are going alone in front of the pandemic, but we have cooperation. And if the member states manage to continue on that way, so the cooperation to solve in a pragmatic way the problem that will arise from the health and economic crisis, I think that Europe will be in a better shape than others. And for others, I mean also the US.
Well, David and Rolla, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think we'll have to leave it there, but this was a longer than usual edition because you had so many interesting things to say. And I do think that figuring out what works and doesn't in Europe is probably one of the most important things we can do as we hopefully try and build a better international system after Trump and after COVID-19, hopefully both of which
you already give him for. You already decided that the election
there will be
there
will be an after Trump. I just don't know if it's going to be next year or in 5 years. But there will be an after at some point. So with that,
so they said in Russia.
Rolla Scolari, a journalist at Il Foglio and La Stampa in Milan, and David Carretta from Brussels, a reporter for Radio Radicale and also Il Foglio. Thank you both for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Order from Ashes, the International Affairs podcast from the Century Foundation. If you enjoy what you heard, please rate us and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It'll make it easier for other listeners to find us and help us keep producing these conversations. Thanks for listening. See you next time.